Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, bonjour et bonsoir. Wherever you are logged in from, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you from the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, the CHFCA, from our branches, Hydrogen BC and Hydrogen Quebec, and on behalf of our members organizations across Canada. We are proud to be the host organization for the World Hydrogen Technology Convention 2021, a global event organized under the auspices of the International Association for Hydrogen Energy, the IAHE, and held every 2 years at locations around the world. Today, we are speaking to you virtually from the beautiful Montreal, dans la belle province de Québec. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Montreal is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Canadian Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters of Montreal, which is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. And today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other people, and we respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other people within the Montreal community. I myself will speak to you from North Vancouver, British Columbia, which is traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish, the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations. Now, putting an event on like this requires many hours of work, and I would like to thank and acknowledge the hard work done by the chair of the CHFCA, Dr. Francois Girard, who is technical leader, hydrogen and fuel cells for the National Research Council, and Professor Pierre Bénard with the University of Quebec in Trois-Rivières, who led the development of the technical programs. I'd also like to recognize our co-host and event organizer, the Peter Sauber Agency. And I would like to recognize Dr. John Sheffield with the Purdue University, who is the president of the IAHE. And I'd especially like to acknowledge our many sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. And that includes HTEC Hydrogen Technology and Energy Corporation, Cummins Canada, Ballard Power Systems, the Canadian government, Chart Industries, Hydro-Quebec, and Hydrogen Optimized. My deep thanks to them and to the others. There are more than 100 member companies, many of whom you will meet over the next 3 days and have a chance to learn more about the world-leading products, the technologies, and the services they offer. And I'm proud to say that they are a very competent group of organizations offering a full range of products and services in the hydrogen and fuel cell value chain. Some are recognized global leaders, others are startups that bring the latest and new technologies to the market, and all are committed to a hydrogen energy future. I'm also pleased to note that we've established regional branches, Hydrogen BC and Hydrogen Quebec. Plus, we are forming an affiliation with Hydrogen Business Council of Canada in Ontario to better support our members at the regional level as we move to commercialization in Canada. We're very grateful for their support and the support of the many other companies from Canada and around the world who have contributed to the workshops, technical sessions, and coffee breaks, and more. Now, last year at f-cell+HFC 2020, I boldly predicted that the 2020s would be the decade of hydrogen. And 1 year on, I'm feeling confident in that prediction. I was speaking with Darrell Wilson of the Hydrogen Council, and he confirmed that he's never seen anything like it. In February of this year, the Hydrogen Council issued a report, Hydrogen Insights 2021, stating that it was tracking 300 billion of announced hydrogen projects through 2030. Now that's up 60% in 1 year, and of that, 80 billion were considered to be mature. Now, I've been quoting those figures in discussions with government and industry because they do attract attention. And now they're already out of date. In a few scant months, Darrell tells me the number is now 500 billion and growing. Now, we all know that not all those projects will become a reality. One is only to look at investment swings in other sectors, whether that's the tech industry, biofuels, or oil and gas, to know that those figures could shrink overnight. But they're impressive. And my sense is that the investment dollars will continue to grow. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, while they're big numbers, those of us who have worked in the sector, and some of us have worked in it for decades, they're not all that big in context of the energy sector. Annual spending on energy projects is $1.9 trillion per year. And that's for all the power plants, pipelines, oil and gas extraction and processing. And looking at that rate of investment through 2030, 500 billion on hydrogen would represent just over 3% of that. And where does that investment need to take us? Well, the world gets 75% of its energy needs from the burning of fossil fuels without any management of carbon dioxide emissions. Fossil fuel demand did take a dip during the pandemic, but as we come out of it, demand is climbing right back up. I just attended a Platts Canadian oil and gas webinar, and their projections show that oil and gas is rebounding right past where it was before the pandemic. And their most likely consumption scenario shows it gradually decreasing, but not nearly fast enough to hit net zero by 2050. And why is that? It's because, but while we can see a way to decarbonize power generation, and that is happening relatively quickly with wind and solar, and even though it's still a long way to go and a difficult way to go, and we can also see improvements in the industrial processing area, but even with 100% decarbonization of power, we still bump up against the growing demand in transportation and heating. And far from demand dropping there, those sectors are continuing to increase. So we need to find ways to accelerate the decrease of greenhouse gas emissions in those markets. And that takes clean hydrogen, clean fuels, and clean power. Distributed emissions in transportation and heating can really only be reduced with electrification, biofuels, and hydrogen. Now, how much of those will each be needed is currently the subject of significant debate. For hydrogen, the estimates range from lows of about 10%, still a very significant number, to as much as 30%, as estimated in the Hydrogen Strategy for Canada. Now, analysts are earnestly trying to determine more accurately what share will be held by each, and which is fair since there's lots of dollars at stake. But I also see some trying to dictate what technology should be used, which is a problem. Now, there are a bit of parallels with the pulp industry, which I'm familiar with. And I'm going to date myself now but for about 4 decades ago, the use of elemental chlorine for bleaching pulp was eliminated and was replaced with a combination: peroxide, chlorine dioxide, ozone, and oxygen. Now, key points. First, there was, of course, much wailing and much gnashing of teeth and threats that this would ruin pulp quality, that capital needs would be unsupportable and would drive pulp costs through the roof. But the end result was that quality was maintained, the transformation happened remarkably quickly, and bleaching costs actually went down. And the reason is that research proliferated, suppliers rushed to offer alternatives, competition was fierce, and a mix of chemicals replaced chlorine. And the second point is, this only happened because governments mandated the desired results: eliminate the emission of chlorinated organic compounds, and they didn't mandate the method. So good policy is necessary to underpin any significant change. Now, transforming pulp bleaching was a major undertaking, but transforming our energy sector is far larger and far more complicated. Nonetheless, the fundamental approach should be the same. Regulate the outcome desired, i.e. net zero emissions or clean hydrogen, not the method to achieve them. And ensure there's a wide range of choices available to make that transition faster and more economical. And what does that mean? Well, it means that for clean transportation, industry and consumers need access to all technologies: biofuels, trolley power, batteries, and fuel cells. Some technologies will dominate certain markets, other technologies will dominate others, but all will need to grow. And similarly, residential, commercial, and industrial heating will be best met with a combination of electric heating and net zero gaseous heating fuels. And last but not least, we'll need clean hydrogen produced from all major energy sources: clean power, biomass, and fossil fuels with carbon management. Now, fortunately, the Canadian government has embraced this approach. The Clean Fuel Fund, which Minister O'Regan will be formally announcing shortly, is just that: a clean fuel fund, not a hydrogen fund or a biofuels fund. Hydrogen projects will have to compete, and fortunately, I believe they can. So how do we get to this place where hydrogen and biofuels are starting to be taken seriously? And they're all viewed as part of the mix of technologies needed for net zero 2050. And is it real? I was part of the sector in the 2000s when hydrogen was expected to be the next big thing. So what is different today? Well, there are 4 key areas in which things are very different from 10 years ago. The first is our ability to produce low-cost, clean hydrogen. 20 years ago, we had gray hydrogen, and that was it. Today, the technologies for clean hydrogen have significantly advanced. Carbon capture, storage, and utilization technologies, or CCUS technologies, allow very low-cost production from fossil fuels. Electrolyzers and scale and performance has significantly increased, and most essentially, lower power costs from renewables make electrolytic hydrogen more competitive. The second improvement is in fuel cell technology. Performance, reliability, and cost is far ahead from 10 years ago. We have commercial products available that offer excellent performance and give a very reasonable expectation that many more additional products for an ever wider range of transportation and stationary applications can be made available. And the third is just the general advance in electric vehicles. Yes, all that hard work that Tesla and others are doing to advance electric vehicles with better batteries, electric drives, and regenerative braking, both benefits and is benefited by fuel cells. That combination, fuel cell technology and battery technology, means electric drive vehicles are viable for all transportation applications, light duty or heavy, road, rail, marine, or in the air. And last but not least is policy. The many countries that have signed on to net zero commitments are beginning to recognize that just as it took policy to wean the pulp industry off chlorine, people will not decarbonize without a policy shove. And that's starting to come. There's much debate about what is the best policies to drive emissions, drive the reductions quickly and at reasonable cost and with minimal economic disruption. But whether by finding a way to put a price on carbon or mandates or market pressures, it's becoming clear to pretty well everyone that continuing to emit greenhouse gases will just not be a viable economic path going forward. And that is all good. Today, technologies are sufficiently advanced that we can and clearly are seeing commercial deployments. Industrial processing is leading the way with clean hydrogen used to decarbonize refining, chemical and ammonia production, and produce advanced biofuels and biochemicals. Early transportation applications in material handling, buses, cars, and rails are progressing, and gas blending projects for heating are proliferating. Demonstrations are underway in more challenging applications such as marine, freight, off-road, and aviation. But there are a lot of significant challenges, and it is not a sure thing that hydrogen energy will enjoy broad acceptance. And if it does not, then I firmly believe that will significantly drive up the cost of our transition to net zero. And as we know, speed is the essence. And if we have to have any hope of keeping our greenhouse gas emissions below 1.5 degrees C, we need to move rapidly now, but even more rapidly post-2030 to cut our emissions. And that is why that Platts analysis of oil and gas use really worries me. And it's the one I mentioned earlier. In those challenging transportation and heating sectors, we need to find ways to lower those, and that's where hydrogen can really help. Now, it's not going to be easy. Our main issue we face today is cost for hydrogen and hydrogen products, because even with subsidies, prices on carbon and low carbon fuel standards and zero emission mandates, hydrogen has to be economical or it will not succeed. Now, if we flash forward 30 years, can we be there? Absolutely. We can assume we've successfully met our transition to net zero, and now cost is not an issue. And the reason is because we have fuel cells and hydrogen storage supply chains in place. It's a global business. We've scaled that up and are supplying products at low costs. The OEMs and developers of vehicles and appliances have integrated batteries and fuel cells into countless products. We have local heating grids and household appliances that are hydrogen compatible. And to produce the huge volumes of hydrogen that we need, we have very large hydrogen production plants producing low-cost hydrogen at scale. Now, it's done at locations with access to very low-cost power, i.e. large dedicated renewable power projects in areas with excellent wind and solar resources, or it is done from fossil fuels in areas with an ability to sequester. Naturally, many of those areas are remote, and so the clean hydrogen is moved in pipelines to major urban centers, to major users, and to tidewater for export. Caverns provide storage for seasonal demand. Efficient liquefiers at large centers and at ports convert hydrogen to liquid or convert it into ammonia or engage it in liquid hydrogen or organic hydrogen carriers for transportation to local fueling stations, industrial customers, and more. And also, there's a established process for shipping it overseas with shipping ports and large overseas containers for the hydrogen. Now, smaller centers and more remote locations rely on a hub concept where clean energy provides power and hydrogen for all the energy needs, heat, electricity, and transportation for multiple customers. And all of this, when combined with a clean power grid, offers a low cost, reliability, and resilience. Now, that's a large vision, and how do we get there? Well, it's going to require some significant determination and careful planning. We got to establish hydrogen hubs to reduce our distribution costs now and to help achieve that scale. We need to focus in the short term on applications where products are ready for commercial rollout, such as buses, forklifts, commuter rail, and cars. We need to start moving forward on the construction of heavy-duty fueling to support the rollout of trucks. We need hydrogen blending to start in natural gas lines with a path to increasing to 100% net zero gaseous fuels. And we need ongoing development and deployment of products for sectors such as mining, construction, marine, and aviation. Now, that's why this convention is so important, because all that work requires your input and your help. The theme of this convention is developing international supply chains, which are vital to supporting deployment of hydrogen technologies. So what you'll see is our plenaries. I'll give a view on what's going on in the world. I'll tell you what companies are planning, what governments are planning, and where the direction is for hydrogen commercialization. The 16 workshops that we put together provide a deep dive into key technologies and markets. And those are led by industry leaders. So you can make the connections with them that you need so you can work with them in the future. And the more than 100 technical papers will show what's coming, the new technologies that will be needed to further lower costs and further improve performance of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies. So I urge you to get involved, to make those connections with those key partners and players, to form partnerships. The workshops are set up to achieve just that, providing you a forum to learn about an application and the leading companies engaged in them. With that, I'd like to remind you that the theme of this event is developing international supply chains. If you're participating in any of the workshops, we have set up a process where you can provide input into what's needed to further strengthen those supply chains, what's needed to build our exports, to attract direct inward investment, and what are some of the technical barriers to that process. So I encourage you to get engaged in those workshops and put your voice in. Let us know. We have a polling process in place to rank what are the most critical issues and activities that we need to focus on. But feel free to add your own too. We're going to compile that into a report, taking the wisdom of the delegates to this convention and compile that into a list of recommendations of what is needed and how we can further strengthen international supply chains. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, and I'll take just a moment here to get myself off of screen here. There we go. And I'd like to say that I'm extremely delighted right now to introduce to you the Honourable Seamus O'Regan Jr. Mr. O'Regan was appointed Minister of Natural Resources in 2019, and he has a mandate to put Canada's natural resource sector at the forefront of the fight against climate change. Prior to that, he served as Minister of Indigenous Services, Minister of Veteran Affairs, and Associate Minister of National Defence. He is known to many Canadians for the 10 years he was co-host of the country's top morning news program, Canada AM. Mr. O'Regan was raised in Goose Bay, Labrador, and is a graduate of St. Francis Xavier University, University College Dublin, and INSEAD Business School near Paris. He received a Master of Philosophy degree from the University of Cambridge. And I was interested to read that his thesis was on working with Indigenous folk in the development of natural resources, which clearly would be a key area to be an expert in his current job. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Minister O'Regan.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm joining you from the island of Newfoundland, which is the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk peoples. It is great to be here at the World Hydrogen Technologies Convention. And I know you've got a full agenda over the next couple of days, a lot of interesting panels, some great speakers lined up, all talking about hydrogen and the opportunity it represents for Canadians, for climate change, and for Canada to lead the way. I think it's fair to say that the past 15 months have been challenging for all of us. It's challenged us in many ways. It's changed seemingly everything from how we work to how we socialize and everything in between, including how we attend conferences like this. But, you know, we're getting on with it. Vaccines are here. More keep coming every week. And we've hit a milestone. Canada is now leading the world in first dose vaccinations, leading the world. First amongst the G7 in the share of population that's vaccinated. First amongst the G20. First amongst countries 1 million plus in population. No matter how you cut it, Canada is leading the way. And it's because of Canadians, their belief in science, their belief that vaccines work. From coast to coast to coast, people rolling up sleeves when it's their turn. So the light at the end of the tunnel is getting a little bit brighter every day. Throughout this pandemic, and well, before one thing stayed the same, the distant and urgent threat of climate change. Climate change is one of those things that's measured globally, but it's felt locally. It's changing the communities around us. It's forcing us to adapt, to change with it. I see it in my province, in Labrador, where Inuit communities just 200 kilometers north of where I grew up. People experienced a winter unlike any that they can remember, unlike anything that their elders ever saw. Average temperatures 10 degrees higher than normal. In the height of winter, 10 degrees. Ice coverage melted faster than in any other part of the country. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Northern Nunavut, the tip of Labrador, it's losing its ice coverage faster than anywhere in the Canadian Arctic. The need to tackle the climate crisis and reach net zero emissions did not end when the global pandemic began. And the urgency will only intensify when we finally get COVID-19 in our rearview mirror. That urgency is well represented by the major shifts that we're seeing in energy. In the last months alone, 3 distinct events occurred on a single day, May 26th, a day that many in oil and gas will not soon forget. 3 events. First, a landmark decision by a court in the Netherlands ordering Royal Dutch Shell to cut emissions by 45% by 2030, 9 years. Second, shareholders of another major oil producer, Chevron, backed a proposal by a convincing majority of 61% of its shareholders to cut their Scope 3 emissions, the emissions generated by customers' use of the products that they sell. And third, ExxonMobil shareholders voted to install 2 new independent directors in a rebuke of the company's efforts, or lack thereof, as they saw it, to meaningfully address climate change in Canada. 3 of those 4 activist funds were some of the biggest pension funds in the United States. In Canada, we're seeing similar seismic shifts. Just a few weeks ago, leading oil sands producers announced an unprecedented alliance, the Oil Sands Pathway to Net Zero Initiative. Suncor, Cenovus, Imperial, Meg Energy, Canadian Natural Resources, representing 90% of oil sands production, all committing to reach net zero emissions by 2050. The Canadian Association of Oil Well Drilling Contractors has changed their name and their brand after 72 years. They're now the Canadian Association of Energy Contractors. Think about that now. Canada's oldest oil and gas trade association is broadening their horizons to include hydrogen, geothermal, and carbon capture technologies. And just last week, Pembina and Suncor joined forces to build a carbon grid in Alberta to capture and transport carbon using existing pipeline infrastructure and building new facilities to sequester and transport 20 million tons of CO2 every year. All these events come on the heels of a landmark report issued by the International Energy Agency, Net Zero by 2050, a roadmap for the global energy sector. The first analysis compliant with limiting a rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, a report that Canada called on the IEA to do because the world needs to know what it will take to get to net zero and what that will look like.
Yeah, sorry, Minister. Just to interrupt, but unfortunately, your video is not showing for some reason. I was wondering if it is there's something you could do to turn that on.
It is on.
Uh-oh, I'm very sorry. I just got a call from our organizers. So your video is turned on from your side, is it?
No, it's on my side.
Okay, it's on. I apologize. Well, we'll just carry on as is. Oh, there you are now. You're there. Good, great. Thank you very much. And please do continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, I just have to get a few things set up on my side. So I'm going to go off video. We're experiencing some technical difficulties here, Mark.
Oh, okay.
I will pick up exactly where I left off. If you could just give me 1 minute. Let me see if I can talk to our people here to figure out why the video is so sporadic on our end.
I will do that.
Thank you.
All right. So, whilst the minister works on the technical issues there, I think it is certainly interesting to hear, and I actually stand rebuked. I think the minister did an excellent job of pointing out some of the amazing opportunities that are going on in Canada. I mentioned the now 500 billion mentioned around the world, and he clearly mentioned some of the key activity is happening here. The ATCO Suncor project is an example. Air Products announcement of their $1.3 billion liquefier and expansion. There's others you hear about as well. So it is clear that there is investment happening here in Canada. I think you're back now, Minister. So I will.
So Mark, let's pick up where we left off. I'll just adjust things here.
You're looking good from where I see.
Does it look okay?
You look great.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going to bore everybody. Don't worry by starting from the top. I'm assuming that you listened to my every word,
That's right.
even if you weren't able to see me. Let's pick up where we were speaking, Mark, about the International Energy Agency and net zero by 2050, a roadmap for the global energy sector. And as I said, it's a report that we asked them to do because we wanted to get an idea of what a net zero world would look like. So as you can imagine, clean energies or clean fuels like hydrogen figure very prominently in it. And it's not just our government saying that we need to lower emissions and build up renewables and clean sources of energy. It's business, it's industry, it's people like you. Every day, new projects to lower emissions move forward because that's long-term value for investors. That's the money. We are at a pivotal moment. I think we were at a defining moment that the world is calling for increased climate action, and the market's demanding it. Investors are demanding it. The market has taken hold. We've seen that over the course of the past year. We've seen that in those dramatic moments for Shell and Chevron and for ExxonMobil. The good news is Canadians are leading the way. In December, when we launched Canada's hydrogen strategy, I said that hydrogen's moment had come. And I am more convinced of that now than ever. A strategy is an urgent call to action and an unprecedented commitment that hydrogen will play a pivotal role in getting us to net zero emissions within the next 3 decades by 2050. A strategy to leverage our vast natural resources, to accelerate domestic production and use, and to cement our place as the global supplier of choice. Hydrogen is no longer a dream. It's possible now. I keep quoting her, but it's such a great line from Sturgeon County Mayor Alana Nachu. She said it at our announcement for the hydrogen strategy. She said, "We know we can do this because we're doing it." Hydrogen projects in this country are happening now, like the one I just announced a few weeks ago with the Alberta Motor Transport Association, a project demonstrating hydrogen refueling stations in the Calgary and Edmonton corridors for 18-wheelers. Commercial, hydrogen-fueled 18-wheelers. More recently, we signed an MOU with Air Products Canada and the province of Alberta to build a $1.3 billion clean hydrogen plant just outside of Edmonton, supplying liquid hydrogen and producing hydrogen-fueled electricity. A plant that uses best-in-class technology, including carbon capture. As we build projects here in Canada, we're also working internationally to leverage our natural advantage and the expertise of Canadians by signing agreements with countries like Germany to help meet their clean hydrogen needs and leading the Clean Energy Ministerial's hydrogen initiative, including launching a global ports coalition earlier this month to decarbonize the global shipping industry. So as we say here in my province, that's where we're at. It is also where you come in. There's simply no way that we can reach our climate targets, no way that we can reach net zero by 2050 without a sustainable low carbon energy sector, without people like you. And there are few options better than hydrogen when it comes to decarbonizing energy intensive industries, powering heavy transport, producing cleaner heating sources, or providing new markets for our energy sector. So today, we are taking the next critical step for hydrogen, for clean fuels, and for our low emissions economy. Today, our government is launching a new $1.5 billion clean fuels fund to facilitate the next generation of fuel production, including clean hydrogen, and to deliver on some of the early actions laid out by our hydrogen strategy. Clean fuels are pivotal to fueling our future, a future which continues to create good jobs. It strengthens our competitiveness and dramatically lowers emissions. Today, clean fuels make up less than 5% of the energy mix. By growing our domestic market and increasing our capacity to produce clean fuels, we can increase that share up to 60%. And that's where it needs to be. Clean fuels like cellulosic ethanol, renewable diesel, synthetic fuels, sustainable aviation fuel, renewable natural gas, and of course, clean hydrogen. The Clean Fuels Fund takes some of the financial risk out of building or expanding clean fuels production facilities in Canada. It will also support feasibility and front-end engineering and design studies, establish biomass supply chains, creating new markets for forestry waste and for agriculture, and develop essential codes and standards so that new clean technologies can enter the market reliably. Clean fuels are not only necessary to tackle the climate crisis confronting us, they're also an economic opportunity. Building up Canada's clean fuels industry will create more than 35,000 direct and indirect jobs, just to start. It will leverage an additional $3.5 billion in other public and private investments over the next 5 years. And fundamentally, it will lower our emissions by up to 12 megatons annually. So we're wasting no time in getting started. A 100-day competitive call for proposals is open right now. We're accepting applications now for projects that increase Canada's capacity to produce clean fuels. This is how we build back better. This is how we exceed our climate goals for 2030. This is how we lower emissions. This is how we lead. This is how we leave no one behind. No energy worker, no energy consumer, certainly no energy producing region like mine. Because who do you think is going to build our clean fuels future? It's our energy workers. Who's going to build the energy infrastructure we need for our low carbon energy mix? Our energy workers who live and work in our energy producing regions in this country. It's you. You will. The workers who helped build our country and our economy into what it is, who made Canada the fourth largest producer of oil and gas in the world. The workers who are building up hydrogen with your tenacity, your ingenuity, and your determination, your ability to do the complex engineering that we need to build energy infrastructure, and lots of it. Clean fuels are how we double down on our common mission. Net zero emissions by 2050, a prosperous economy that continues to create good jobs, and a low carbon future that leaves no one behind. I know that's ambitious and I know that's a lot, but we're Canada. It's what we do. It's what you do. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Minister. That was very inspiring, and I really liked your emphasis on the inclusiveness of hydrogen, how it benefits everybody in this great country, and how every region can take advantage of it. We can play on the enormous strengths we have as a trading nation, as an energy producing nation. That's very encouraging. Now, you've graciously agreed to take a few questions, so I do have a couple I'd like to ask, and one is, I mean, the Clean Fuel Fund. We have been eagerly waiting the formal launch of that ever since it was announced as part of the Strengthened Climate Plan, and it is very good to have this supporting all types of clean fuels, because we do need all types of clean fuels. But I wonder, are there any specific carve-outs or any sort of mention of hydrogen or any other particular fuel that we can look to?
Well, let me say, if you look at the basic breakup, I think right now of the 1.5, 1.4 is for clean fuel production capacity. We can dig into that in a bit, but also to establish biomass supply chains. We've got about a little over $30 million for that. And then to develop essential codes and standards, which I'm appreciating, not only from listening to industry, but listening to my friend and colleague, Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne, who's working on that. That is essential in order to have market reliability or reliability in the market. So this will support the implementation of the Clean Fuel Standard, which is really important. So we've gotten the Clean Fuel Standard. This is the Clean Fuels Fund to help support that. And you look at some of the examples of clean fuels that I spoke about. I mean, biofuels, whether cellulosic ethanol, renewable diesel, synthetic fuels, sustainable aviation fuel, and then the gaseous fuels of clean hydrogen and renewable natural gas. Like I said, we want to get it up to 60% from 5% for clean fuels. So that is a huge opportunity for energy, for forestry, for agriculture sectors, as well as for clean tech. That 100-day competitive call for projects started on June 21st. Project decisions targeted for winter of 2022. The deadline is September 29th of 2021. And projects selected for funding, they have to be completed and commissioned by the end of the program, which is March 31st, 2026. So the funding itself is conditionally repayable contribution agreements of up to 30% of the total eligible project cost, to a maximum of $150 million a project. That's a maximum of $5 million for feasibility studies, for basic engineering studies, for detailed front-end engineering studies for projects that are related to growing domestic clean fuel. So new facilities, facility expansions, facility conversions, hydrogen blending, and natural gas. And in terms of who can apply, individuals and not-for-profits, but also electricity, gas utilities, private sector companies, industry associations, research associations, standard development organizations, indigenous and community groups. And I think we'll see partnerships that occur amongst those, but also our academic institutions and our provincial, territorial, and regional and municipal governments as well. And we're looking at international entities as well, including not-for-profits. So companies, industry associations, the same thing. So I think you'll see significant partnerships amongst those. I think that's really good for the industry too.
Absolutely, we're going to need those partnerships to move forward, and I think this is the nice thing about this is really driving towards some scale too. I think there's some requirements of these be meaningful projects that can produce significant quantities of product for our needs. So I mean, this is incredibly welcome, and the risk of being greedy. Is that what all that we need? Is that I know you've got the $8 billion net zero accelerator. You've got invest support for zero emission vehicles. You have tax measures in place for construction of hydrogen equipment. What more? Is this enough to get us going, or do you see other things that are needed to help drive forward hydrogen adoption in Canada and other clean fuels?
Well, you're right to be ambitious. I'm ambitious. So I agree with you, Mark. I think one of the biggest things on our side is a price on pollution, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I don't think, I was reading an increasing number of articles in the United States where they're kind of coming to the realization that one of the best ways in which they could equip their companies and truly incent the marketplace in the United States is to have a price on pollution. Now, I doubt, given the current domestic situation in the United States and the makeup of Congress, that that's going to happen. But it is the cleanest and most efficient way in which to incent the market, and that is something I think that we have on our side. So I see that. I mean, goodness knows it was controversial enough for a number of years, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it. But now, particularly, where we see our biggest, our best friend, our biggest market, our biggest competitor, now that we see them really getting their head around climate change and energy, and hitting their Paris targets, there's an increasing realization in the United States of just the efficiency of having a price on pollution and allowing the market to take hold. which we see as the most sustainable change that we, and the most predictable, I think, for companies. But we've got $155 million in the Clean Growth Program and the Energy Innovation Program, and both are focused on advancing clean technologies through R&D. They've led to some first-of-kind projects like converting forest residuals into biofuels, advancing sustainable aviation fuel, which is going to play a huge part. We're really coming to grips now, I think, with the amount of GHG emissions, the intensity caused by aviation. We've got the hydrogen strategy for Canada lined up. Like you mentioned, we've got the $8 billion Net Zero Accelerator Fund, which expedites decarbonization projects with large emitters. We've got the tax credit for investment for CCUS, which is going through consultation, and we're incredibly bullish on that. That alone on CCUS has a goal of reducing emissions by at least 15 megatons of CO2 annually. And very proud too, we've got another $150 million for EV infrastructure, which I think is going to play a huge part as well.
I would love to talk further, Minister, but unfortunately we're cutting to the time for some of our other speakers. And so I'd like to thank you at this point very much for joining us today. Really excited by the announcement of the Clean Fuel Fund. I'm sure that many of my members will be working to get applications in, and I'm very confident that hydrogen will represent a large part of that fund and the awards out of that. So thank you very much, and all the best.
And let me just say, Mark, I know a lot of people have said, next year hydrogen's time will come, or it's just around the corner. I think it is here. I mean, we're seeing that. We are seeing that around the world. We are looking at the European Union. We're looking at the Americans. We're looking at Japan, South Korea, the significant investment and incentives that are being put into place. We very consciously wanted this to be a national hydrogen strategy that fully embraces not just green hydrogen, but blue hydrogen as well, building not just on our strengths in some of our regions of hydroelectricity, such as here in my province of Newfoundland and Labrador, in Quebec, in British Columbia, and in Manitoba, but also our significant natural gas reserves that, coupled with CCUS, can produce blue hydrogen that we need, looking particularly at Alberta and at Saskatchewan. We are ready. We have all the things in place. Primarily, we got the right people. We got people with expertise in how to put this together. And that's how we're going to do this. That's how we're going to lead the world.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
And with that, I'd like to again thank the Minister for his remarks, and